Grayson Grundhoefer, SicEm365.com, recruiting analyst, football analyst, co-host of the Bearcast with Craig, joins us on 365 Sports. Craig, you want to give us an update on the World Cup?
Sure. Argentina wins the shootout, so they are moving on to the next round, defeating the Netherlands 4-3 in the shootout. And, fun finish there. Glad we got to see it. We were kind of behind. That's why it was confusing when we were talking about it. I think it was confusing for us trying to figure out what was going on, but caught up and got to catch the last couple kicks. And so that's what you sign up for when you're watching games like this at this level. So, yeah. Awesome win for Argentina that now goes and faces Croatia in the semifinal.
Grayson, thank you for being patient and joining us a little bit late. By the way, we had Dennis Dodd at 4. It's been pushed back, but I don't know, maybe not even today, working on that. Grayson, all right, so it seems to me, and I read your stuff on the premium section, it seems to me, is Baylor kind of in a little bit of a funk, a dry spell when it comes to recruiting? They lost a kid from Kansas. Kind of clarify where they are for this class that they're trying to sign in a couple of weeks.
Right. So I would say the first part of what you're kind of talking about with Calvin Clements, the big offensive lineman out of Kansas, he decided to flip his commitment to the Jayhawks. And, I mean, he's from Lawrence, so this makes a lot of sense. He visited Kansas a couple times unofficially during the season. He also visited Baylor during the season as well. But I think this was one of those decisions where it was more so thinking about staying closer to home while also seeing the fact that Kansas isn't Kansas anymore, if that makes sense. So it was kind of more, I think during the season they became more appealing to Calvin, and so it allowed him the opportunity to stay close to home. It's a bummer for Baylor, for sure, because he was a guy who was going to enroll early, a guy that they had they thought was going to be a really good player. I thought he was going to be a really good player as well. He was my second highest rated offensive lineman in this class behind Sean Tompkins, the big offensive lineman out of Georgia. So it's a big loss, but I would also tell you that now they have room, right? Now they have another spot available for them to go out and potentially land another prospect or go out and try to make up for losing Calvin Clements. And that's kind of what they're trying to do this weekend as the big offensive lineman out of BYU, Campbell Barrington, is taking an official visit this weekend. He was a freshman All-American in 2021. Then he dealt with injuries this past year and eventually just didn't quite live up to what he did his freshman year because he got replaced once he was injured, and then he kind of had to play all over the offensive line a little bit for BYU. But he's the guy that I know would fit in really nicely with what Baylor's trying to build up front. You give them another guy that could play left tackle or right tackle, which they absolutely need this cycle. And he's a guy who's older. So while losing Calvin is big because he's a young guy that you really like, you also need a guy that can come in and play next year. And that's what a guy like Campbell Barrington would be able to do for them a year from now. And also, his brother plays at BYU as well. So, there's some pretty good pedigree there. Campbell has a good relationship with Eric Mateos and, of course, Jeff Grimes. So a lot of positive signs trending in Baylor's direction there as he gets ready as he really arrives in Waco this weekend for his official visit.
And Grace, I don't know if you know this about the Clements kid. He earlier in the year, Lance Leipold, in just a press conference when they asked him about getting recruits, he didn't mention him by name because he can't, but he said, we've got local kids and, a guy who would love to come to Kansas that are committed elsewhere because I can't tell them if we're going to be good or not. And he said we have to prove it on the field. So then here they go prove it on the field, and all of a sudden a local kid decommits from where he was and goes to Kansas. So Kansas getting good was all he was really waiting for, it feels like.
Yeah, and I mean, he's a Kansas legacy, right? So, I mean, it was going to be hard for Baylor to win that recruiting battle if Kansas was good. And Kansas showed, they're trending in the right direction. They got Lance Leipold to stay, which I think was also a huge concern, right? That he would go somewhere else and become a coach elsewhere. And then I don't think Calvin would have even considered them. So, yeah, I mean, good for Kansas. I think this is just one of those tricky situations where Baylor landed a guy who just happens to be in Lawrence, Kansas, as things are starting to turn in the right direction for that program.
What about the rest of it, Grayson? Do you feel like there's momentum there, or is there a little bit of a lack or question about kind of the mojo going on at the moment?
Right. So, I mean, I guess the other kind of question that we probably got to talk about is Lakeview Centennial defensive lineman Trey Wilson. He's kind of like a defensive end / outside linebacker jack type prospect. Had a really, really good senior year, and is a guy that's been committed to Baylor for a while and really has loved Baylor throughout his process. But I will say during the season, he took an unofficial visit to TCU. He lives really close to there, so that's not really surprising. But as the season progressed, obviously Baylor had some ups and downs this year. TCU had a really good year. And so as things have progressed, TCU's continued to recruit him. And now they're actually getting him on an official visit this weekend, which is big news. And some news that I actually posted on the board earlier today. We kind of got signs of it earlier this week, but it finally was confirmed going into this weekend. So that's pretty big news there, I would say. We'll see what happens. Baylor is still, I think, in a good position there. But on the flip side, if you go on an official visit somewhere, it means there's clear interest. And so Trey definitely has clear interest in TCU, and we'll see if they're able to flip him. Outside of that, it's an official visit weekend, like I mentioned. So Caden Jenkins, Palmer Williams, and DJ Coleman, those are three guys that have been committed to Baylor for a while, but they were unable to take their official visit earlier in the process. And so they're taking their official visit right now this weekend, along with Campbell Barrington. So that's kind of where things are at right now. A lot of their prospects are getting ready to early enroll. I think I have 9 listed currently who are going to enroll early at Baylor. So now it's just a matter of, them signing on December 21st. And I think a lot of programs are still looking at some Baylor prospects. And so we'll see if they're able to hold on to the remainder of the class. So it's going to be a very interesting finish to this 2023 cycle, as well as obviously the transfer portal, which I'm sure we're going to talk about here in a minute.
Well, yeah, and my question to you on that, and also even the class, the incoming high school players, does the opening now at defensive coordinator make any difference whatsoever?
Yeah, I would say that it hasn't made a huge difference. I think most of the guys that I've talked to in this class, it's been pretty consistent that it was a shock, but also that we're still locked into Baylor. And I think, again, a big part of that is because Dave Aranda holds so much influence on the defensive side of the ball that I think most of these guys feel really comfortable with him being the defensive coordinator, essentially, being the defensive guru and the defensive mind that he is. I would also say, Ron Roberts was a solid recruiter. He wasn't an elite recruiter, and neither was Ronnie Wheat. So I don't think it's some massive loss as far as the prospects think. But it will be really interesting to see who they go out and try to land to be the defensive coordinator, because maybe that guy will have connections and be a recruiter who maybe grabs someone late, kind of like they did last cycle with Alfonso Allen. Maybe you're able to go out and find someone for the second signing period who fits what they're trying to do defensively. So I would say it hasn't made a huge difference, at least not up to this point.
Grayson, how many transfers do you expect them to add, but how many do they maybe need?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's one of those things where the more that I've looked at it, the more I'm seeing here going, okay, they need a guy at this position, this position, this position. And for me, I do think the number is somewhere around 5 or 6 is where I think they're going to end up landing. Now, the problem is I say that, but currently they don't have the roster spots to really do that. So there's going to have to be more attrition in order for that to occur. Also because you're bringing in a 2023 class that has quite a few prospects in it as well. So you got to make room for them and then make room for any transfers that you add at the end of the day. So we'll see if they can get more attrition, but I do think 5, 6 guys seems about right. They just have quite a few positions of need that I think they're trying to address. And based on the momentum of the portal, it definitely seems like they're actually being active and trying to address those positions, which also tells me that there's probably going to be more attrition coming. So just be ready for that. And not all attrition is bad attrition.
Do you think there's any chance that they are looking at some of these bevy of quarterbacks that have entered the transfer portal?
Not at this time. I really don't. I think that they might add a quarterback if Kyron Drones elects not to come back to Baylor, but I don't think it'll be someone who's necessarily going to challenge Blake Shapen for the starting quarterback spot. Just at this time, I'd be a little surprised by that. But who knows? Crazier things have happened. Maybe they find someone who's a diamond in the rough in the portal, and he ends up being more of a challenge than we expect. But at this point, I think it's probably going to be, or I'm expecting it to be someone more like a Luke Anthony type, who's maybe played a few years in college. You know what you're going to get from him. He can provide reliable depth to your quarterback room. But again, that's only if Kyron Drones decides that he's not going to come back, because I think still right now they would like that him return.
Last thing. Austin Novosad, obviously the gem of the entire class, with all due respect to anybody else. Is that in any way, shape, or form not 100%?
I think that it is still 100%, but I can tell you, and I've been saying this and been honest about this for a long time, schools aren't going to stop recruiting him, and schools haven't stopped recruiting him, and that's going to continue. So, but as long as he doesn't go on an official visit or anything like that, I think things are still good. And as of right now, he has nothing scheduled as far as an official visit goes. He's just going to let the process play out and then sign on December 21st and enroll in January, because he's an early enrollee. So that's kind of where things are at right now. That's the latest I have information-wise on him, but I can tell you that other schools are still communicating with him.
All right. Thank you, Grayson. Great stuff. Appreciate your time. Grayson Grundhoefer, SicEm365.com writer, recruiting analyst, football analyst, host of the Bearcast, and more. We're going to get Dennis Dodd. I just got a text from